Hi, my name is Chris Weekley, and I'm the product owner here at Rev.io, and welcome to a Dev Talk on our newly released REST API. So where and what is the API portal? The API portal contains documentation along with an explorer for clients, prospects, partners, anyone like that to access, look at code snippets, run tests, that sort of stuff. The documentation tab has an introduction to the API, an introduction to Rev.io, details on API, terminology, sample code, that sort of stuff. The Explorer tab actually allows clients or anyone with a sandbox login, so prospects or partners, anything like that, to run test calls against real Rev.io data. So the sandbox right now, it's a little sparse on data. We're going to use it today, but we have really simple scenarios that we're going to use it for. So the portal can be found at developers.rev.io, but this is basically down here at the bottom. We'll look at the portal, but this is what it looks like. You see home, documentation, API Explorer. There's about, Rev.io, contact, and then a link to take you to our website. So how do I use the API Explorer? Existing clients can access it if they have a login to Rev.io. They just use their Rev.io login and password information. They may need to be granted a role that has API access. So admins typically have access. There is an API only role as well. And I believe that it will restrict people from making calls to parts of the system that they don't have access to. So, if they get errors or something, they should be booted out if they're not allowed to basically set information. In the API Explorer, you'd actually click this try it button and it'll prompt you for a username and password authentication. So the username is just going to be your Rev.io username at your client code, and then your password would be your Rev.io password. This is the actual developer portal. When you land on this page, you're going to see the same stuff that was in that screenshot: home, documentation, API Explorer. And those are our three principal tabs. There is information about us, but a lot of this information is actually found in the documentation. So it's just a quick link to the documentation. So if I go to the documentation over here, I can see I have this left panel that tells me a lot of information. I have an introduction, use cases, FAQs, contact information, and then some stuff about, how APIs work. What is an API? What are requests? What are resources? What are any of these types of typical terminology that people use? Then there's more documentation specific to our API, so about authentication, that sort of stuff. And then down here in the portal documentation is where you'll actually find that bit about the sandbox access request. So this just explains to anyone who's interested in getting access to the sandbox how they would request it. Email us, and you can see there's this REST access at Rev.io. Provide this information, and then we'll create you a user. We could also give you your own sandbox instance, but that's just a little bit longer process. So then we get to the fun part, which is the API Explorer. So the API Explorer, if you think about it, is just kind of a way to query Rev.io without querying Rev.io, without having access to a specific database. This over here, all of these things should feel pretty familiar. I think the term is resources when you're talking about an API, so it's an API resource, but it's just something in Rev.io. So addresses, auditing information, build profiles, customers, orders, requests down here. We'll get into requests, services, service types, all that sort of stuff. So all of this should feel very familiar when you're looking at it because it's straight out of Rev.io. Over on the right here is where you'll actually get your results when you run tests or run calls and that sort of stuff. So let's go to customers, for example. Within each resource, you'll also see a different set of actions that you can do. So you can do something like searching a customer, creating a customer, viewing a customer, replacing a customer, or a partial update of a customer. So there's a lot of common themes between these different resources that you'll see, but they may not all be the same. It depends on what we have exposed in the API that we allow people to run these actions against. So you'll see that orders have fewer options than customers do. you can only search order, view order, replace an order, or partial update of an order. But in general, it's very similar what you can do across different resources in the API. My employees at a call center have software that they use to manage customer interactions, some type of homegrown software that I've created that I want my call center employees to work with. But I want to use Rev.io as my source for all customer account balance information. I want the customer service rep to ask the customer for their name when they call into the call center and use that to pull up their customer profile information in my call center software by connecting with Rev.io's API. Someone calls in my call center, hey, my name's John Smith. My customer service rep gets a prompt on the screen to type in John Smith's name to pull up his account information because he said, I want to know my balance, my amount due and my amount overdue, or something like that. So I'm a commercial, all of my customers are commercial customers. So anyone named John Smith is not actually my customer, right? They're going to be company ABC. But I know that John Smith is going to be a contact within my customers in Rev.io. So I'm going to go to contacts, search contacts, and John told me his name, so I know his name is John Smith. So I'm going to type in John Smith here, and I'm going to click try it. And so this is where the authorization comes in. I have to do it the first time I get here, but in subsequent calls, you'll see that the authorization stays, and all I have to do is click try it again. So if I use my sandbox login that I created, I've got Chris_Rev.io, which is my login at API Sandbox, since API Sandbox is my client code in this instance. And I click enter, and I get a result. So that's kind of step one, is do I get a result at all? If I were programming something, if I got no results, I'd have to take some sort of action. Obviously set this up to give one result. And I can see that I have John Smith, and he's associated to customer ID 1001. So the next step that I need to know is I need to go find customer ID 1001 so that I can actually look up the account information that John has asked me about. So I take customer ID 1001, and then I'm going to go to my customers resource over here. And in this case, because I know the ID of the customer that I'm interested in, I'm actually going to just go ahead and view that customer directly. So I've got view customer, and I've got ID 1001. I'm going to search, and then I'm going to get this result over here. And as you'd expect, there's a ton of information returned about the customer because we keep lots of information on every individual customer profile. But I can see I have this finance section here, and I can see I have amount due $200 and amount overdue is $100. So I can tell John, your amount due is $200, your amount overdue is $100. And just to try to connect all of that, if I go into Rev.io and I find account 1001, I can see that right at the top here. Balance 200, overdue 100. So it's basically just having a computer program retrieve that information for me about John without having to go into Rev.io, because I want my customer service rep to be in my homegrown software. All right, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening to our Dev Talk on the REST API.